Every week in the NFL is full of surprises, especially at running back. But look, how is it possible that the two best running backs in fantasy, Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson, do almost nothing?
Well, I mean, CMC, this is a tough spot, right, against the Texans. Bijan Robinson, I mean, against the Dolphins, that seems very strange.
Well, not if you listen to my theory here. Now,
wait. Are you about to say...
All I'm saying is, I swear one time I saw Raheem Morris and Chauncey Billups maybe talking, hanging out a little bit. I'm just saying. All right, well, whatever happened last week, let's just put it in the rearview mirror. Let's focus on week 9, running backs. Who do you want to actually start in your lineup and who do you want to sit? Now, this week, we do have 4 teams that are off. It's going to be the Eagles, the Buccaneers, Browns, and Jets. And there are some running backs you just don't think about. Got to have them in your lineup no matter what. Yes, Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Josh Jacobs, and Devon Achane. And before we get started talking about running backs, do us a quick favor. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, just click that subscribe button. We are on the way to 100K. We want you to join us and be a part of the Endgame community. So the first game of week 9 is going to be the Ravens taking on the Dolphins. In this matchup, I mean, you have a must start in Achane and let's face it, a pretty much must start here in Derrick Henry, don't you think? I mean, even without Lamar Jackson last week, he still continues to roll.
Yeah, I mean, you're not benching Derrick Henry, of course. And look, as of now, John Harbaugh said he expects Lamar to play. But, I mean, you know, we've been bamboozled before. I guess we'll see. And you look at it on paper, you think Dolphins smash spot for Derrick Henry. But look, over the last 2 games, I don't know why. They held Judkins to 3.4 yards per carry. Last week we talked about it. Bijan just 2.8 yards per carry. But that being said, if you got Derrick Henry, you're starting Derrick Henry. He's a strong start this week.
Yeah, whatever happened with the Falcons, Dolphins, okay, it doesn't matter. This is still a horrific run defense. You're starting Derrick Henry no matter what. And look, it maybe wasn't so much just about matchups and Lamar being there, but Cooper Rush not being there. So even if it's Huntley still, I don't care. I'm starting Henry, pretty much no questions asked. Now on Sunday, we're going to see the Bears taking on the Bengals. This one is really interesting because we have 2 really bad run defense, but also this is 2 rushing offenses that have suddenly come alive just in the last couple of weeks. But how much are you buying into DeAndre Swift after, well, it wasn't so great last week because they actually wound up losing, and then part 2, there's Kyle Monaghan.
Yeah, you got to feel great this week against the Bengals. They're easily giving up the most fantasy points to running backs. Breece Hall just smashed. I mean, I put Breece Hall on the boom specifically because he was playing the Bengals. I'm not worried about last week. I think Swift has to be a strong start. And I'll say, look, against the Bengals, you can flex Kyle Monaghan. Isaiah Davis didn't have a bad game last week against his defense. You could have started him and been fine with it. I think that'll be Monaghan this week.
Yeah, this is actually a better matchup. And you think, well, look, the Ravens defense was one of the worst in every category. You kind of called it. They're a little bit healthier, coming after the bye, a little bit better. And so for that reason, I'm going to say I'm going to sort of give Swift a pass from last week. But at the same time, my worry is what happened last week was game script, right? They were losing. They couldn't run as much as Ben Johnson wants to run. It's possible that happens here because let's face it, Caleb Williams has not done a whole lot the last couple of weeks, and the Bengals are scoring now all of a sudden. What if the Bears fall behind early? So I'll say he's very solid, but you know, a lot of upside. I just don't feel like I can guarantee that he's going to smash. I do think Monaghan is worth a flex either way. So that Bengals rushing offense, I mean, Chase Brown was in a lot of circles a 2nd-round pick, 3rd-round pick. We expected him to be a weekly starter. This is probably the first time I can remember since, I don't know, week 1 that I actually feel kind of good about him.
Yeah, I feel good about him this week, not just because of what he did last week, but because of the matchup as well. 55% of his runs are those man gap runs. Bears give up the 4th highest yards per carry on those runs. I will say we've seen Pirine get a little more involved the last couple of weeks. Pirine has 16 carries over the last 2 games, but I still think Chase Brown is solid in this matchup. And then I'll say it's risky, but if you want to flex Pirine, you can because, again, he is getting a little involved, and it is a good matchup.
Yeah, I mean, look, at this point, I don't think we can say Pirine is too much, lower on the tier list here than a guy like Kyle Monaghan. He's getting touches. I know a lot of it came on that one touchdown run, but he's being used actually in the red zone, which is concerning if you have Chase Brown. He's not my favorite flex, but he is flexible. And then Chase Brown, again, I can't remember last time I could say I think he's a solid option. Got plenty more matchups to talk about, but first, before we get into the rest of the running backs, make sure you get into the Underdog app and set your picks for week 9. And if you haven't done that yet, you haven't signed up even for Underdog, well, this is the best time because you still get deposit match up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash for your first deposit if you use code ENDGAME in the promo code section. And you also get a free pick every week. There's a gimme, and new customers also get $100 of bonus funds put into their account as soon as you spend $5 towards any pick. You already get the free pick, you get free cash. Try it now if you haven't yet. Sign up on Underdog and use code ENDGAME when you check out. Now let's talk Vikings at Lions. Both these backfields are a 1-2 punch, just one is a little bit more effective than the other. Well, let's start with Minnesota. I mean, we know we're going to get a new quarterback, so I wonder if this affects your view of these running backs.
No, it doesn't affect my view of these running backs at all. I'm going to say right now, I can't do it with Jordan Mason this week. I'm going to sit him. You look at it, 57% of his runs are those zone runs. Lions 6th toughest against those zone runs. Plus, last week we saw Aaron Jones, more snaps, more routes, one more carry here. I think there's a chance that he gets completely game scripted out here. I don't want to take that chance this week. I'll say Aaron Jones in a PPR league. You can flex him if you need to. I don't love it, but he probably will at least catch a handful of passes.
Agree with you totally on Aaron Jones. He will be involved in passing downs. I mostly agree with you on Jordan Mason just because he's still the guy that they use in the short yardage and goal line situations. He does have touchdown upside. This could get out of hand, but I also don't assume that the Lions are just going to demolish them. So I think Mason, at least in this week where we still have some teams on bye, could be flexed. And for the Lions, you're starting Gibbs, no question. Let's talk about Monty. He's kind of been all over the map this year, which is unusual for him. Does he just go back to being solid this week?
Yes, but risky solid, because we've seen his snaps, his touches, they've kind of dropped a little bit, but it's the Lions. They're at home. The Vikings worse against the run than the pass, so he's got touchdown upside, of course, in this offense. I'm going to say solid, but very low-end, risky solid.
Yep, I think that's about right. Solid, of course, he always has touchdown upside. The Lions, we figure, will be, if not playing ahead, at least in a neutral game script situation here. And the Vikings are not quite a run funnel, but they're a little softer against the run. So if you got Monty, you shouldn't worry too much. The Panthers are taking on the Packers this week. Josh Jacobs is probably just going to continue to score in every single game he plays somehow. So you start him. Now for the Panthers, it's getting interesting, right? Just when you think, what do I do here? We got this timeshare, right? Rico and Chuba, what do I do? But it sounds like things might change this week.
It does. Got this quote from Dave Canales saying, Chuba's meant a lot to the organization. We wanted to give Chuba the opportunity to go out and continue to impact our team in a positive way. But then saying, we cannot ignore that Rico has been exceptional in a couple of games, and then in the opportunities he's had over the last 2 weeks. Also said he's made some excellent plays, love the tempo and violence that he's running with. And these are all things that we're talking about and working through this week. It sounds like they're finally giving in and saying, we have to give Rico the ball more, which makes sense. Let's hope Seattle at some point comes to their senses. But it sounds like the Panthers are at least coming to their senses. So I'm going to say Rico is solid. Again, I'm going to say risky solid because this is a tough matchup against this Packers run defense. But man, he's been so good. If he's getting 60%, 70% of the carries, how do you not start him? And then for that reason, I'm not even going to risk it with Chuba in a tough matchup like this.
Yeah, look, good for Dave Canales for just being honest and doing what's best for the team. I know they just paid Chuba last year. That shouldn't dictate who is on the field. I mean, they are paying Rico Dowdle as well. Not as much, but still. You should do what's the most logical to help you win. That's kind of the point here. And it wasn't just those 2 games where Chuba missed. Rico Dowdle on the season, 5.7 yards per carry. Chuba Hubbard, 3.5. Rico Dowdle's missed tackles forced rate is over 3 times higher than Chuba's. You can't ignore that, so you know what, this is not a great spot, but still, Rico has been so good. He should be a solid option now that we know he's going to get more touches. I probably should say sit here with Chuba. I do still think he's going to have a role. Like, they're not saying like this guy's just out. He's not going to be on the bench watching the whole game. He'll still catch some passes. He could score. So long story short, he is barely a flex. This week, the Broncos going to Houston to take on the Texans after taking care of the Cowboys. Now, these are probably two of the more aggravating backfields here because we feel like there should be one guy pulling away and it just doesn't happen. Let's start with Denver. Last week, J.K. Dobbins did all the heavy lifting, got all the yardage. R.J. Harvey did all the scoring in the end zone. So how do you treat this?
Yeah, this is so annoying if you have J.K. Dobbins. Like, it's not like J.K. Dobbins has been bad. It's not like he's not getting usage. But somehow R.J. Harvey, he's got 4 touchdowns on 13 total touches over the last 2 games. I mean, like, this feels unsustainable for R.J. Harvey, and this is a tough matchup against the Texans. Risky flex this week because, I don't know, maybe he does somehow find the end zone again this week. But sadly, I can only say Dobbins this week, a strong flex. I can't put him higher. I know the volume is there. I know he's been good. But this defense just shut down Christian McCaffrey. This is a legit defense here on the road against the Texans. Just a strong flex this week.
Yeah, maybe I'm being too optimistic this week. Well, I'll say with Dobbins, this Texans defense, I keep saying, is legit, but especially so against the passing game. And look, Sean Payton's a smart guy. I think he'll know that he should probably try to establish the run. He'll do it. I think Dobbins is going to get the majority of the touches. I feel like he's at least on the low end of the solid tier because of volume. And then R.J. Harvey, I guess you can't not at least put him as a flex option. As someone who has a lot of Harvey, I don't even know if I want to start him ever on a weekly basis. Like, I feel like I should, but then I don't think that it's the best move. So, look, if you need him, you could flex him. Now, I don't think at any point this season I felt like I needed Nick Chubb, but could you use him or Woody Marks in this game? It's the Broncos defense.
It is a Broncos defense, but they're much tougher against the pass than the run here. But, I mean, how good can we really feel? The plus side here is they are at home. I feel like it shouldn't be a blowout. Like, it's probably going to be like a close, kind of low-scoring game, honestly, here. So, like, Nick Chubb gets the volume. I'll say he's a risky flex just because of the volume here. And then I'll say Woody Marks, I'll just call him like a flex, just a standard flex. I feel better about him because at least he has some juice. He catches more passes, but I can't say I love either of these guys this week.
Well, even though Chubb still does get carries, and I don't expect this game to necessarily be lopsided, I don't know. I can't do it. Unlike some of these other guys who you're like, Chuba Hubbard and R.J. Harvey, at least they actually catch some passes and scoring touchdowns. Chubb has 2 all season long, despite how many carries he's gotten. I'm just going to sit him. There's not enough of a ceiling for me to be interested. And Woody Marks, as I talked about on the waiver wire video, I think he is flex worthy. This game script could favor him. Don't expect a massive game ever, but he is flex worthy. All right, Falcons taking on the Patriots this week. Yes, you're still starting Bijan Robinson, no questions asked, and let's not get in conspiracies here. I don't know what happened last week. Tyler Algier, I don't feel like he really needs to be in your lineup, though.
No, look, last week we liked him because, hey, it's the Dolphins. He got lucky scoring that touchdown. This is not nearly as good of a spot against the Patriots. No thanks.
All right, now what about that Patriots backfield? I know we've said this many, many times, and it really feels like we're hoping against hope. But actually, Travion Henderson was much better last week, although he actually didn't get used more than he has been. So, what now?
He was much better, but did you see, like, every run was to the right? Like, okay, I guess if he runs to the right, he's good. But that's it. So, yeah, like you said, I mean, his role didn't really change. Ramondre still had 72% of the snaps, 60% of the carries, 64% of the routes. This is still Ramondre's backfield. Henderson, I'll say risky flex this week because at least he showed something last week. Maybe he rips off a long run, but very, very risky here. But look, I actually kind of like Ramondre Stevenson again this week. This is another sneaky good spot for him. Falcons allow almost 5 yards per carry on those man gap runs. Remember, I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. 60% of his runs are those man gap runs. So I think this is a sneaky good spot for Ramondre. I'm going to call him a strong flex this week.
Last time you talked up Mondre a couple weeks ago, he had himself a nice game. I still do think this Falcons defense is better than they showed. They have been good all season, definitely better than the Titans. So I think he's a flex with some upside, same as you. And I guess we can barely keep Travion Henderson in the flex tier. 49ers taking on the Giants this week. And yes, you're still starting CMC. And before we talk about the Giants, just a moment of silence here. Cam Scatterboo, we hardly knew you. On the way to a great rookie season, and now it's over. So that means it's a mix of Tyron Tracy Jr., Devin Singletary.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about Tyron Tracy. Not Devin Singletary, not starting him. I mean, look, he dominated the touches after the Scatterboo injury. He was the guy earlier in the year before he got hurt, and Scatterboo showed what he can do. So I think he's going to be the guy again. That being said, this is a tough matchup against the 49ers. The Giants are a very zone run-heavy team. 49ers only allow 3.8 yards per carry against zone. But he gets volume, he catches passes. So I'm going to say solid, but like low-end, risky solid.
Yeah, I mean, I was big on Tyron Tracy before this season. This is not the way I wanted to see him take a hold of that starting job, but he's got it. I do feel like we'll see Singletary probably more than we want, enough to be annoying here. This game, look, I doubt that the Giants are going to get routed or anything like they were by the Eagles, because the 49ers offense hasn't exactly been great. So I can't believe you're higher than me on Tracy this week, but going forward, we'll see. I just want to see it. I want to see this iteration of Tracy this year in this offense with a new quarterback and all that be really effective, and then I'll go more than a flex. Colts taking on the Steelers this week. You're pretty lucky if you got JT on your team, or were you just very smart? Now, if you have a Steelers running back, you're still questioning things on a weekly basis. Jaylen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell. You like either of them in this matchup?
Well, not Kenneth Gainwell. There's just not enough here. I kind of like Jaylen Warren this week. Look, 64% of the snaps, 72% of the attempts, 52% of the routes last week. He's still clearly the guy. Colts, not a run defense that scares me. What does scare me this week, though, is this Colts offense is scoring 30 points every single week like they're on easy mode. Game script worries me a little bit here. He'll catch a few passes, but he's not like a monster pass catcher. So I'm going to say, based on the volume and the fact that it's not a tough matchup, again, low-end, risky, solid, but not one of my favorite solid picks this week.
Well, it usually takes a really plus matchup for me to feel better than a flex on Warren. This ain't it. Like you said, Colts, dominant offense. Steelers, one of the worst defenses still. Not sure what is going on. Did I see right? They didn't even get a single sack last week. Don't they have a Watt somewhere there on the defensive line? Anyways, yeah, I think Warren is a flex just due to volume, and that's it. This week we got the Chargers taking on the Titans. It's a road game for them. But look, based on the way we saw Kamani Vidal last week, now 2 out of 3 games that he has started, over 100 yards, and now it's the Titans. Too good to be true? Is this too obvious?
I think it is too obvious, honestly. Look, I know on paper, Titans, he's so good, but look, they only allow 3.96 yards per carry on zone runs versus 6 yards per carry on those man gap runs. 61% of his runs are zone runs. That being said, though, in 2 of the 3 games, he's been so good, and I don't feel like this is going to be a game like that middle game where he was bad. I'm going to say solid, but just solid here.
Oh, look, solid is fair. I don't think we can go too much higher. I can't get carried away, say he's like a must start. But look, if you have Vidal, you're feeling good. I don't think there's any concerns here. I would put him over, some solid options like even David Montgomery because he gets more touches. It's a great matchup. And look, I get that Tennessee, isn't the worst run defense, but game script, it's going to favor the Chargers. And this Tennessee team has already not only fired their coach, but the fire sale is starting. They've already traded Roger McCreary. Who knows who else might get traded before Sunday comes. So, for me, Vidal is a very solid choice. Now, for the Tennessee backfield, obviously you can't feel too great these days. I feel like last week we had them both as just must-sits. Are we there again?
I don't know about must-sits, but, you can't feel good. You certainly cannot feel good about Tony Pollard. Less than 50% of the snaps last week, only 35% of the routes. And again, game script probably not going to favor him. So, only because, you know what? No, scratch that. Yeah, Tony Pollard's a sit. I'm not doing it. I will say Tyjae Spears, I think you can flex him because, again, he's the guy who gets more run when they're losing, and it's the Titans against the Chargers. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're going to be losing this game.
Yeah, that's not a very long limb to go out on. I agree. I'm going to keep them both in the flex range because one thing Pollard is still doing is catching a few passes. I mean, there's technically a floor. I hate to say it, Spears just looked better last week running the ball, right? Had more burst. But that said, how many touches do either of them get? So both are more desperation flex options. This week, Saints taking on the Rams. Now look, you just finished talking about Alvin Kamara not too long ago, but on a panic video, so something tells me you're not feeling great about him in week 9.
How can you feel great about him? What have we seen the last 2 weeks? It's been brutal. Even without Kendry Miller, it's been brutal. And then you look at it, 58% of his runs are zone runs. Rams only allowing 3.7 yards per carry on zone runs. And then you can't even bank on pass catching anymore. 2 targets last week, despite the fact that Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shook combined for 50 pass attempts. You can't even bank on pass catching. I can't do it with Kamara. Like, look, you want your 6-7 points, go ahead, but I'll look for upside somewhere else.
Well, that's the thing. You know, if Kamara's being used as he was in the past, where he was basically the go-to target, right? He's going to get 7-8 targets and pile up receptions. Okay, fine. He's got a floor. Even if they're getting blown out, maybe it even helps him, you know, unlike most running backs. That's not how Kellen Moore is using him. He'll get a few receptions, but not enough to give you a ceiling. I mean, I do still feel like he's got somewhat of a floor. Again, I mean, with some of the flexes I've thrown out there as possibilities, I can't say he's impossible to start. I just don't really want to if I don't have to. Now, I'm pretty sure I do want Kyren Williams in my lineup if at all possible this week. What about you?
Yeah, you got to feel good about Kyren Williams here. I'm not scared of like what we saw Blake Corum before the bye there. Not worried about it. At home against the Saints, got a great chance to score a touchdown. Going to get the volume here. I can't quite go strong because there are some running backs I'd feel much better about than Kyren Williams, but he's very high-end solid here. And look, I'll say if you want to flex Blake Corum, it's risky, but you can. I mean, I think he at least has touchdown upside in this matchup, and if they're rolling the Saints in the fourth quarter, which they very well could be, he might get some run.
Well, that is true. It'd be interesting to see how much run Corum does get. That could limit Kyren, but look, they're coming off the bye. This matchup is too good. I'm going to go strong with Kyren. An interesting thing with the Saints, not that they've been really good on, you know, either side of the ball, but the defense has been bad all season. And an interesting thing is that the last 2 weeks specifically, they've gone from being extra bad versus the pass to extra bad versus the run. I'm not sure why, but they're allowing in the past 2 weeks 5 yards per carry, the 5th most fancy points to running backs. I think Kyren is pretty much in a smash spot here. Now 2 teams both coming off their bye week. It's the Jaguars versus the Raiders. All right, so I'm very curious to see what exactly this backfield is going to look like with Travis Etienne and Bashal Tootin. It's been mostly all Etienne lately, but as we've gone over, you know, multiple times here, he has not been good for the past 3 weeks, and all of a sudden we've got Liam Cohen talking about, you know, their best players seeing the field more. Was that just a Travis Hunter reference, or was he talking about the running backs also?
I guess we're going to find out, but I'm still going to bet on Etienne this week, although like you said, you can't feel as good. He's just has not looked as good as he did that first month. Maybe the bye week will help him here, and it's not like this is a tough run defense against the Raiders, so I'm going to say solid, but again, like one of the lower end solid guys, because you know, I do worry if he doesn't rip off a long run or score a touchdown, what are you really getting here? And look, maybe he was talking about Bashal Tootin getting more involved, but let me see it before I put him in my lineup and the guy gets like 3 touches this week. Not doing it with Tootin.
Well, I could be reading too much into it, but I'm worried enough about Etienne. Like you said, it's been a month now since he has ripped off a long run or scored a touchdown. And, you know, this isn't exactly a great spot for him because as bad as the Raiders are overall, it's a lot more so against the pass. So I think he's just a high-end flex. And then Tootin, I think we do see him get the ball at least a little bit more. And, you know, he's been more effective than Etienne. In fact, out of all running backs that have at least 25 carries this season, Bashal Tootin has the 2nd highest success rate. Will that turn into more touches? Well, we'll see, but it might be worth finding out in your flex spot. And then for the Raiders, it's all Ashton Genty. That's why they drafted him. How do you feel about him against the Jags?
Probably not as good as most people do, because you look at his 67% of his runs are zone runs. Jags 5th toughest against zone runs. Obvious worries with the offensive line here, but he's still talented. He gets all the volume. I can't drop him lower than solid.
Yeah, I'm probably still too high on Genti based on how bad this offensive line is, but there's no way he can get a post-bye bump like a lot of rookies do in terms of touches, because he's still the only guy who gets all the touches here. But maybe in effectiveness, maybe they actually design more plays to suit his strengths. This is definitely a better matchup than what we saw before on the road against the Chiefs. So I don't know. I'm betting on the talent here. I'm going to say he's a strong start. I mean, if I got him, I want to find out. All right, now this should be a good one. The Chiefs taking on the Bills in Buffalo. I mean, James Cook, yeah, there's no question here. You're still starting him. He shows you why. A lot of questions still about the Chiefs backfield, like why? Why, Andy Reid? Do you insist on giving Kareem Hunt every goal line touch? I don't know. I have no, stat to back this up. I feel like Hunt's on pace to set the record for touchdown to yardage ratio or something like that.
Yeah, he probably is. This guy touches the ball 2 times a game and he scores. He's even on a better pace than RG Harvey when it comes to touches for touchdowns. Look, Kareem Hunt, risky, of course, here, but the Bills are bad against the run, and hey, he's going to get the goal line work. I guess he could score. I'll say Pacheco, I still feel pretty good about him. I know it's frustrating watching Kareem Hunt continually score, but 77% of his runs are zone runs. Bills' second highest yard per carry on those zone runs. They're not very good against the run. He could always rip off long runs, catch some passes. Don't love it, but I think you could flex him.
Only because the Bills' run defense, like you said, has been vulnerable. Pacheco is barely a flex for some yardage, and of course, now I guess just every week that he plays, Kareem Hunt is flex-worthy because he will probably score a touchdown. And Sunday night, we're going to have the Seahawks against the Commanders. Take back what I said earlier. These are the 2 most frustrating backfields that we're meeting in Week 9. Let's start with the Seahawks. We already know the deal here. Kenneth Walker, the one who's actually getting those explosive runs and just looks better than Zach Charbonnet, who gets all the touchdowns.
Yeah, and this is such a confusing backfield because you look at it, Kenneth Walker, barely half his runs are those zone runs, even though that's what he is much better at. Then you look on the flip side, Zach Charbonnet, 60% of his runs are zone runs, even though he's only averaging 2 yards per carry on them versus over 4 yards per carry on those man gap runs. This is bizarro world here. What is going on? This backfield doesn't make any sense. But look, Kenneth Walker, a risky flex. That's as high as I can go with Kenneth Walker because he's not going to get goal line carries. He's going to split the carries here. You need a long touchdown really, and then Charbonnet, I'll say a flex because he's getting half the work and he is getting the goal line carries.
You know what this is? I'm thinking about it now that we just talked about Kansas City. This is just a slightly better version of the Chiefs backfield. Kenneth Walker gets you a floor because of yardage, and Zach Charbonnet will probably score a touchdown every game and do nothing else. Charbonnet, this will tilt you if you drafted Kenneth Walker, is top 10 out of all running backs on carries inside the 5-yard line, rushing percentage for his team. That's right, 75% of the time they're near the goal line, it's Charbonnet who gets the ball. And he's cashing in most of the time, and yet Kenneth Walker has more than 3 times the explosive run rate of Zach Charbonnet. And so for that reason, they're both just flexes. And then for Washington, everyone who was doing victory laps on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt a few weeks ago, you might want to put it in reverse. He's somehow getting worse as his rookie season goes on. Is this just about Jaden Daniels being out or what?
I don't know what's going on here. I mean, we're seeing McNichols catching passes here. And it wasn't like the Chiefs were rolling them and they couldn't run the football. They can still run the football. It's like they've lost all confidence in this guy or something. So, look, this is not even a good spot. Seattle 4th toughest in terms of on those man gap runs. 67% of his runs are those man gap runs. Barely a flex here.
Barely a flex. I don't really even want to flex him. But again, you may not have a better option. And I guess I've been pretty generous with running backs this week in terms of flex possibilities. So, I mean, he is still technically the RB1 there. Then Monday night, we're going to have the Cardinals taking on the Cowboys. And so this has cleared up a little bit. I mentioned Bam Knight as a waiver wire possibility. And that was before I even knew Michael Carter has been cut, not even on the team anymore. That didn't last long. So how do you feel about Bam Knight? But I guess Amari DeMarcado is still kind of lingering there.
Well, you got to feel good about Bam Knight now. This shows confidence. Now, I do think they'll probably bring Michael Carter back on the practice squad if they can. And like, they may elevate him for game time, but I think this shows that they feel pretty good about Bam Knight. You look at it, this is a pretty good matchup. I mean, this is a really good matchup against the Cowboys, I should say. Like 72% of his runs are those man gap runs. Cowboys allowing 5.2 yards per carry on those runs. I got to say he's solid this week. Again, I'm going to say like lower end risky solid, but he's going to be the guy. And then I'll say Demercado, if you're desperate, you could flex him because, again, it is the Cowboys and they're terrible against the run.
I might draw the line at Demercado. That's pretty desperate, but I guess if you're in a deep enough league, maybe. Like as far as Bam Knight, he's not like he's been very efficient, but there's something they like about him, and there's definitely something they don't like about Michael Carter. So now, I mean, the one thing you gotta like is his touches had been trending up, as I mentioned on that video. 4, 11, 14 carries. He's scoring touchdowns. He's definitely got some upside. That said, I'm not gonna go crazy here. He's just a high upside flex. And then as far as the Cowboys, it's all Javonte Williams. Is there any reason not to start Javonte Williams?
No. How do we not have this guy on the must starts yet? I mean, this isn't like a smash spot, but it doesn't even matter. At home, you got to start Javonte. Strong start.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to start Javonte Williams, so definitely a strong start. All right, that's the scoop on the running backs for Week 9. You know we're going to have you covered at every position and give you everything you need to win, and it's going to be in this playlist.